Hello, everyone. Today is the 14th, I think, July 14th, 2021. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. So today, Ronak will go over a design for the volume mode conversion issue that we discussed a while ago. And then we can do an update on the white paper progress. All right, Ronak, do you want to share your screen? I think that's easier.
Hey, yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, so let me just. So can you just see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So hi everyone. So I was speaking to Xing the other day about this issue. So I just thought I would take a stab at it. And basically, we were looking to get more sort of input and ideas and stuff. So the document that we have here is pretty high level. So I probably just go through the problem and then sort of high level solutions. And then, of course, any feedback now or offline later as well is welcome. So the issue is basically, it has to do with the volume mode sort of conversion issue, where you could take a snapshot of a PV with the volume mode of block, right? So technically there's no file system. And then a user could sort of maliciously restore that sort of PV, restore that PVC from a snapshot and change the volume mode to a file system and then try to mount it. And then eventually that will crash. So right now, I think there's nothing that prevents sort of a user from doing this. And the sort of solution of just preventing that altogether is not an option either, because basically it's a valid use case. I don't want to get into like the details. Honestly, I'm not very sure about how backup vendors work either. But basically, a backup vendor could potentially want to, I think, temporarily sort of restore a snapshot using a file system mode and then sort of delete that sort of temporary volume that they create. So I was just looking at basically stuff like pod security policies, and recently that was deprecated and replaced with pod security standards. So I was just looking at that and seeing how we can sort of apply those concepts over here to sort of fine grain or sort of provide permissions to what a particular user or service account can do, right? So this document basically speaks of sort of both of those solutions, where we have, I mean, obviously the names are just like not really thought of in detail, but basically a volume security policy or a volume security standard, and how we could potentially apply that to our problem over here. So first off, basically we need to store the PVC's volume mode, right? When a user takes a snapshot of a PVC, currently we just sort of populate that PVC name without any volume mode. So one change would be to sort of add that mode to the snapshot status, and that information will be used later when a PVC is being restored from a snapshot. So any questions up to this point?
I was just going to mention that the one thing preventing crashes is a lack of bugs in the kernel, right? We're not aware of any actual bugs that let you do anything evil today, but there's a potential for it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably why it's not like a P0 at this point, and it's been all right till now, right? Cool. So so the first sort of policy or solution that I was looking at is like volume security policy, which is basically similar to like the pod security policies that we have today, in the sense that basically we would introduce like this cluster level resource, where you create a sort of a volume security policy, and then you fill in the spec of that policy with whatever permissions you want to give to that to that particular policy, and then you tie that policy to either a user or a service account. So as part of this proposal, I'm only sort of suggesting the addition of a single field called allow volume mode modification, which would default to true. And of course, in the future, if we come across whatever other sort of security nuances that we want to look at, it could easily be just added over here, right? So, and that volume security policy would sort of be tied to a user or service account, similar to what PSP does, right? So when in PSP, like pod security policy today, if you need to tie a policy to a user, you sort of create the role binding, and then sort of mention that, you know, that particular service account can use this policy. Like you have to specify the verb and stuff. So I haven't given that in detail over here, but it's all in this this link on the Kubernetes docs. And then, of course, we would introduce an admission controller, which basically intercepts requests to create a PVC, right? So what that admission controller is going to do is it's going to look at whether, you know, the source of the PVC, whether it's being restored from a snapshot. And if it is, then is it modifying the volume mode, right? If it is, then it's going to look at what the volume security policy is for the user that's trying to create that PVC, right? If no policy is specified, then we're going to default to true, in the sense, allow it to go through, because that's sort of the default behavior right now. However, if that particular user is not allowed to change the volume mode, but is attempting to do so, this admission controller would reject that request. So the PVC would never be created on the API server. Any questions? Cool. So PSP actually was deprecated in Kubernetes 1. I think it's 121, and I think it's going to be removed altogether in 125 or something. And they've sort of moved to this thing called pod security standards, and also like a 3-tier pod security proposal. It's actually pretty interesting, and this proposal is actually very detailed. So I've again just tried to take similar concepts from there, and see if we can apply it to sort of our use case over here in terms of volume creation instead of like pod creation. And the reason they've done that is basically there are a bunch of like limitations with pod security policies. Again, all of that is sort of given in this proposal, so I've tried not to sort of duplicate information. But anyway, so this sort of volume security standard would support 2 modes, which would be privileged or restricted. Privilege is basically allow the widest level of permissions, so no restrictions on creating PVCs or, you know, modifying the volume mode. And restricted would be the most restrictive policy, which, you know, lets you fine grain your sort of security model for creating volumes. And the difference here from pod security standards is that you actually would label a namespace. So rather than, so one of the issues with tying a policy to a user is, I mean, think of it like this. I could be a user that creates a PVC on my own, right? So in that case, I'm the user, but a PVC could also be sort of created as part of a stateful set. So then what is the user in that case, right? So I think those are sort of the nuances or sort of these smaller issues with PSP that also apply here. So the idea here is that you actually apply these standards to a namespace rather than a particular user. And that is in the form of labels. So there are sort of 3 modes that we would allow, again, similar to pod security proposal, the pod security standard, which is enforce, audit, or warn. So the idea behind that is that sort of enforce is, you know, if a policy is violated, it causes that PVC creation to be rejected in case of a violation. But audit and warn sort of lets the PVC creation go through, but still, you know, sort of informs the user in a couple of ways, either by auditing or, you know, on the CLI. And the reason we do that is because, you know, customers might be wanting to, or users might be wanting to move to this model without really, or would rather want to sort of see how the feature works before, you know, enforcing these sort of policy constraints. So, so basically we would add it as a label to the namespace, where this prefix is obviously still undefined, but some, I guess, kubernetes.io -- / enforce, audit, or warn. And then you would specify the policy level, which is either restricted or privileged, right? So, so when this PVC is created, the admission controller would basically read the label of that, of the namespace that it's created in, and then decide what policy needs to be applied and in what mode. So again, it would compare the PVC's volume mode to the sort of source snapshots volume mode. And then if they match, it's all good. If they don't match, then it would look at these labels and then take a decision accordingly. And yeah, basically that's a very high level sort of blast of information, I guess. So yeah, so I just wanted to like sort of put this out there and of course get your comments and see what everyone thinks about sort of these ideas, and of course any other ideas if you have any.
I think the comments from Rob. So you're asking if there are any existing kernel, existing bugs for this. I think right now there are no known bugs.
Yeah, I don't want to derail on, you know, this discussion on that.
Oh, okay.
You know, on that too much, but I'm just curious if there's any communication with the, you know, sort of the Linux proper community around, hey, is this the right behavior? And obviously it's their ball of wax, and that's a whole nother topic as to whether or not this community can influence that. But I'm just curious if there's been anything established on that end of things.
I think Yang can probably answer that, right? Yang, you there?
These crashes are treated as CVEs on the kernel side, but like, you know, the file systems are huge, like XFS, X4. So these CVs happen from time to time, and then it takes quite some time to have them patched in all distros.
Okay,
so
cool. So it's more of a, you know, in pragmatic terms, deal with it here, prevent the problem, address it, whatever. Yeah. But there has been that communication, and let the real slow moving wheels turn on the Linux side, and maybe one day it'll do more graceful things.
No, well, the kernel, it doesn't know that this volume has been available as block and now it's mounted. It doesn't know it because, like, for kernel it's just a block device. It doesn't know who modified it before.
Yeah, understood. Okay, like I said, didn't want to derail, but glad to hear there has been, you know, there is some intent on the Linux or in the kernel side to maybe improve things over time, or at least there's awareness such that they could potentially have intent later. Anyway, let's not derail. Thanks.
I have this kind of stupid question that when in the statement of the problem is, it looked like that the couplet, when we try to mount a corrupted PV, it will crash, and we're trying to find a way to address the problem that, you know, to avoid the situation like this happen. But have we ever think about why don't we just address the original problem, that is when we mount some PV that it doesn't have does have corrupting file system, so that it will not crash. So that is like, you know, any attempt to do that?
I don't think that is that possible to check that, or are you talking about Kubernetes to check this?
The original.
So yeah, so that is actually just say if some malicious user try to do that, this is not, of course, not like normal behavior, right? So I don't think it's actually, is that actually even possible to find out if the file system is corrupted, or it's always possible to do something?
If it
The
is
only
not
way, the only way to
corrupted, how
prevent
can
this
we-
is to not have bugs. And the problem is that historically they find bugs, you know, a couple a year.
Right. This is, yeah.
So the idea is, given that there have been bugs and there will probably continue to be bugs, even if we don't know about any bugs right now, we got to do something. And just trying to scan the file system or trying to ensure that it's not corrupted is unacceptable, because that assumes that
Oh,
that
no, that's
someone
not what I
hasn't
meant.
gotten exploited.
What I meant is how can we avoid crashing? If
Oh, that's probably, yeah, that's a kernel level thing, right? So maybe
okay.
Yang can answer that question. There are bugs. So I think Yang was the one actually brought this up, right? So Yang probably, you can answer this one better. Is you are familiar with those type of bugs?
Again,
You saw those before.
There are bugs in kernel. Some few times a year, somebody finds how to crash a kernel using corrupted file system, either X4 or XFS or NTFS or whatever. These bugs happen, and there is no way how we can check before we mount that the file system that we are going to mount is going to crash the kernel or not.
Yeah, you have to basically trust the user at least a little bit. And that's what this security policy is about, it's about establishing who you trust and who you don't trust, because it's inevitable that bugs will creep in and malicious users will exploit them.
And I think in this case, like a lot of these bugs manifest in ways that, like, you know, a typical FSCK won't detect.
Okay.
I talked to kernel guys here in Red Hat, and they treat them seriously, like this is a CVE. But the severity of the CVE is not that high because it requires root privileges. And if somebody who can mount can crash the kernel, then like they have many other ways how to crash the kernel. They don't need to mount, like they can stop they can halt the machine basically, even without mounting something wrong. So it doesn't have the highest CVE rating, but it is fixed. It is being fixed by distros. Now in Kubernetes, we kind of have, we allow users remotely to attack, like to crash nodes. If somebody can create snapshots and PVCs, then they can crash basically the kernel.
Okay, I had another question. So other way we can provision PVCs. If you have a pre-existing snapshot, you can pre-provision a volume snapshot content, and from then create the volume snapshot, right? So then in that case, where do you get the mode from?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And I think that's an open issue that I've sort of listed at the bottom, which I didn't really go through, basically for pre-provision volumes, I think Xing pointed this out, that the same thing as what you said, right? The status wouldn't be populated. So I think that's an open question, but again, this is a high level design, so I didn't really think about like stuff like that.
Yeah, so I wonder, yeah, if that's the case, maybe at least this proposal cannot handle that at this point. So I think at least we want to start somewhere, right? So maybe let's say, of course, we can continue to think about how to handle that case, but does not look like we can cover that with this design.
I think in the pre-provision case, somebody with admin privileges has to create the snapshot to import, right?
But this is the volume snapshot. This is the namespace one. So the admin will be creating the content, right? Unless if you're saying that we add that in, and also when you're creating that, the status will not be populated, right? So admin normally probably using the CLI kubectl to create it, and so they won't be able to change the status unless they write a controller. So it will be a little too much to require them to add that.
But I guess I think the main thing is since an admin has to create the content object, that means that content is more trusted.
Are you suggesting
Yeah.
to, like, we have this field in both content and the volume snapshots? Right now, in this current proposal, this field is only in the volume snapshot status, not in the content status. So, I mean, I guess there are a couple of things here. Do we also want that field to be in the content status? Because that's one question. And the second question is, when the admin creates it, normally they use the kubectl, or at least right now, you know, when I try this, I don't write a controller just to create a content with the status populated, right? So, I mean, how can, without writing a controller, how can the status field be populated? With a kubectl, you cannot.
Yeah, I think my main
Yes.
question is in the pre-provision case, are we as concerned? Because the content has to come from
The
someone
admin.
with admin
Okay.
privileges.
Mm.
I guess you could, in theory, perform an exploit. You would just have to trick an admin into importing a snapshot that had been maliciously constructed.
Well, it's not the snapshot that is that has a problem. It is the volume, right?
Right. Well, you create a volume
Yeah.
with a raw block volume. You fill it up with a malicious fake ext4 file system or XFS file system or
Oh,
whatnot. You
so this,
snapshot that, and then you trick someone into importing it as a file system snapshot that you create a volume from.
yeah. So I think it's probably less of a concern. Yeah. It's still possible. You also have like internally, you also have a malicious user. I was just reading some security documents internally. Admin can also be malicious.
I mean, we can't stop people from creating these malicious volumes and snapshots of them, but we can at least remember that they were raw block volumes at the time that they were.
Yeah, but I mean,
were
right now
snapshotted.
so what do we do? How do we do that for this? If this is provisioned, how do we get that information? I guess.
I like the idea of amending the spec and tracking the FS type.
Adding the spec, okay.
So
yeah, right now
so
this is in status because if we add it in the spec, then of course then the admin can add that as well. Is that
you could put it in the volume snapshot
way?
content spec, right? So that the controller that constructs the volume snapshot content can know what PVC it is snapshotting. And
but then we're getting into the same. We'll have been trying to avoid that. So the field, so this field will be okay. So the spec field in this case, it could be either be like a status because it's changed by controller or by the user in the pre-provision case.
But
yeah, so
for it to be part of the status, CSI has to provide it, right? Everything in the status is provided by the CSI plugin. The sidecar just goes and asks the CSI plugin, what's going on with the snapshot? You know, tell me its creation time, tell me its size,
I mean,
tell me.
But I'm saying that the pre-provision case is not even going through the CSI, right? The content, we're talking about the content, right? It doesn't really go.
Right, everything in the content status comes from the CSI driver. The spec is filled out by the snapshot controller, and that is the thing that could copy the volume mode from the.
No, but this if pre-provision case, admin is the one who is creating the spec for the content.
Right. So at that point,
not snapshot controller.
The admin would know, right? He would know what he expects this thing to be.
What I was trying to say is when we were doing the volume snapshot redesign, we're trying to avoid a field in the spec that, like, depending on whether it is the dynamically provisioned or statically provisioned, it is populated by different things, either a controller or the user in the pre-provision case. So that's what we're trying to say. That's the reason we have the source, two different source, if it's static and dynamic. So, but the ID is still it's the only thing that is there, the snapshot left ID. But anyway,
I think we could copy the volume mode off the PVC and treat existing ones as the same way PVCs work. If it's blank, assume it's file system.
But it may not be there anymore, right? So that's the thing.
No, any
Oh.
snapshot created by the controller would just copy it, and then anyone created by an admin, you'd have to just fill it in. And if you left it blank, it would assume file system exactly like PVCs do. Then at
Yeah,
least we
all
could
I'm
have
saying is like we're going back to, I mean, I think it's fine. I'm open to this one. Maybe we can, this is an option. Maybe Ronald, you can write this down. So this is one option that we could solve this problem, which is to have this in volume snapshot content. We have this field in the spec.
yeah.
That's the only way to.
Then at least we would have a record of if someone did create a raw block PVC and then snapshot it, we would at least know then when they tried to turn it into a file system PVC that they were making the change. And then you could examine some policy to say, is that okay or not? And for a backup system, you'd say, sure, that's okay, because we trust the backup system. But for Joe Schmo, say, no, we're not going to let them do that. Deny the policy, at the policy level.
Yeah, so if it's in the spec, then we don't need that in the status, I think. Do we still need that in the status? We still need that in the status because that's like create volume time. We need to, I guess it's okay. This controller can see the namespace field as well. So maybe that's something we can decide later if we want it to still be in the status. Sounds like it's not necessary anymore.
I say put it in the spec of the content object.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if it's there, it's still necessary to have that also in the status field. Volume snapshot is no longer necessary. So we just have that at one place.
You only need it in the one place, I think.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let me actually look at how the API would change out of the content then and see if that's an option.
Okay. So that's for, okay, that's for the preprovision case. And the other open issue that you have there is how to prevent malicious user from updating namespace label. I guess that we probably want to see how does the pod security standard, how do they solve that problem? I think we just do.
Yeah, I need to probably look at that again. I'm not sure how they do it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually that's it for me. I would appreciate if anyone can, if they have any other comments later, just leave it on the page and I can start thinking about this in a little more detail as well.
Okay, Michelle, do you have other concerns with this? Can we move forward with this, or are there any?
Yeah, I think this sounds good. I guess are we still deciding which approach we want to take?
Yeah, so we can actually maybe make a call here, and should we also bring this up with the security team and ask them? Probably, I would think they will be suggesting option 2, since that's what they are doing with the pod security policy.
Yeah.
So
I would probably lean towards that too, since it's more closely aligned with the model that they're going with.
Okay. So should we just maybe Adrona can clean this up and make that option 2 as the main option and the other one as alternative? And then maybe before turning this into a more formal CAP, should we ask the security team to take a look first to see if they have some big concerns? Or
that sounds good to me.
Right. Cool.
I actually have a question regarding this. So I'm curious, why would those labels be part of the namespace and not be part of the PVC itself? In this case, like, we're treating the entire namespace as one policy, so there would be a unit of granularity, right?
Right. So, so I think the difference is who applies the label to the namespace, right? if I'm the user creating the PVC, then and I want the highest sort of permissions, then I would just say assign, like create this PVC with no permission, with no restrictions, right? Versus probably the admin would add that add the label to the namespace.
Yeah, but in that case, I guess, would it be a valid use case that a user would want two different set of policies within the same namespace, or we are saying that that is not a valid use case?
Yeah, so I think that's right. So in this second sort of, when you apply to the namespace rather than having the thing like the policy assigned to the user, in that case, you're saying that for each namespace, we just have one sort of standard. And any namespace any PVC created in that namespace is going to follow that standard.
Okay, sounds good. I was just curious, like why would that, like what are some of the pros and cons of having that versus having this specified to a user? But I guess we can, I mean, I can add some comments to the doc.
Yeah,
we can,
sure. Yeah. Let me, maybe I should add that as a point as well. I can do that. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. So I think that's it from me, Xing. You can let me stop sharing.
Okay, I thought it was something else, but I couldn't remember what that was. I thought it was something else that we also I think can you go back to share that again? So the new API object you're adding, is that's like under the policy group, right? Policy API group, is that? Can we?
No. So hey, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, can you move to? I think just move down, not here. Right? Let's see. Oh, I think this is what, since this is option 2, so I guess maybe it's okay. I was just so if we. Oh, so this is yeah. So this would be a new API object, but I think since this is option 2, maybe it's okay. I was just trying to think like this is like an in-tree API object, right? And then because we talked about the admissions controller, should that be auto tree or in-tree? So if this is in-tree, but then we need to look at one snapshot. So then for that, I think it has to be auto tree.
Right.
And then if we look at the second option, we don't have a new object, do I? We don't have a new API object.
Right.
It's just some labels and
it's just labels.
Then it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so let me actually go back. Okay, so I think Xiang Chen is on vacation and he has some problem with network, so he couldn't join. He said he will be working on the white paper on his vacation, so we will sync up with him when he's back. So I just want to see if there was any update on this. So going back to, I think last time, Fang, you said you are looking at the Rustic approach, and are you adding something to the doc, or have you got a chance to?
No, I haven't looked into
Not yet.
the Rustic yet, but I don't think we should spend more time on the Rustic, because I think that is we just want to add some example how different source snapshot being used, and we already have 2 examples there. I think that should be enough for the white paper. We can take a look more in Rustic, when we dig into the text.
Okay.
When we design, yeah.
You can maybe just like add a link instead of writing down the details, maybe that's fine as well. Just say, okay, there's another example, and then just here's a link. That's maybe okay, but that's okay. I'll take a look and see if we can add this to the main doc. And also, I see that you're trying to set a meeting to talk about.
I would like to for us to continue to talk about to design the cap for CBT for this, and hopefully that the guy can other engineer can help participate in that meeting, and we can move that to a cap in the next.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh, sorry. I say that hopefully that the community can participate in that design meeting, so we can move the cap forward.
Did you find the time? That or
I sent out the poll to.
So
select,
I was actually thinking, do we actually have to have a separate meeting? Can we just use this meeting time? We can actually. I think that
would be nice too, if we can.
I think it's fine. So we don't have anything on the agenda for next meeting yet. So why don't we just
I think that's
review this?
Yeah,
I think everybody on the call are interested in that anyway. Okay, so let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to find another meeting time that works for everybody. Okay, so so about this quiet ass hooks, Tom, are you still waiting for Steve to update doc?
Yeah, Steve talked to me. He said he was a bit busy. Steve, are you on this call?
Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
Sure.
So
That's fine.
meeting, but we haven't got to it. So.
Okay. We can probably, I look at your doc. I think that looks good. We can probably include that first, and then when he gets time, he can update that part later.
Yeah, that sounds good. We're including his as well, though, right?
Mm-hmm. And I look at those information we add in the appendix about how various applications does QuiaS and backups. That I think maybe it's better to have them just stay in a Google Doc, and then we can just add a link to that Google Doc. I'm thinking maybe that will be better.
That would be good. I do imagine that we're going to turn this into a PDF. So we probably want to link to things that are a little more stable. So maybe we make those PDFs or something as well.
Okay, so I'm not sure that we want to do a PDF. I was actually thinking maybe, well, yeah, we can that we can decide later. Yeah, we can. PDF is one way. Otherwise, we can actually just enter this as just like the text, like the markups is fine too. I think we can decide that later.
Yeah, I think you're right though. I think it's pretty detailed and doesn't fit as well. So you can push it off somewhere else. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's see. Does anyone else have any update on this? I think Ben, I think your name is also on one of the sections. It's in the volume populator.
Yeah, the volume populator.
Can you write up? Yeah, can you write up something for that?
I thought that I did a while back. It might be out of date, but there should be something in there.
No.
Oh no.
Yeah, if you can.
Okay.
This is some summary. It doesn't have to be the detailed design, right? It's really.
Is there an earlier version of this doc? Because yeah, I wrote like several paragraphs at one point and pressed the update.
I just don't remember. I can.
I hope I didn't screw it up.
But definitely there are several versions. Maybe confusing. Maybe that you added that in one of the docs. Yeah, it's possible. Okay, let me actually go look at other docs and see if it's somewhere. Okay. All right. Yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else other than that. Okay, does anyone else have any other issue that you want to discuss today? If not, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.